room went quiet so fast it felt like someone had pulled the plug on the whole evening. 1 second, there was silverware clinking and the low hum of 100 conversations layered over each other. The next, nothing. Just the sound of chairs scraping against the hardwood floor as people turned to look. I didn't move. I stood in the doorway of my aunt's banquet hall in my army dress uniform. The dark blue jacket, the gold buttons, the ribbons aligned exactly the way I'd been taught. And I let them look. My mother was at table 7. I could see her from where I was standing. She had her hand pressed flat against her collarbone, the way she always does when she's trying to hold something in. That's the moment I want to tell you about. But to understand why it mattered, you have to understand what came before it. I grew up in a house where success had a very specific shape. My father was a cardiologist. My mother chaired the board of a regional arts foundation for 11 years. My older brother graduated from Duke, then got his MBA from Wharton, and by 32, he was managing partner at a consulting firm in Chicago. When family friends asked about my siblings at dinner parties, my parents answered with the kind of ease that comes from having rehearsed the answer so many times it no longer feels like bragging. When they got to me, there was always a small pause, a half-beat of recalibration. Colette is in the army, my mother would say, and then, almost immediately, she's very dedicated. Dedicated, like I'd taken up competitive rowing. I enlisted when I was 19, not because I didn't have other options. I'd been accepted to 2 universities and had a partial scholarship waiting, but because something in me needed to know if I was capable of more than what my comfortable suburban life had asked of me so far. I needed to find out what I was actually made of. Turns out, quite a bit. I won't walk through all of it. What I'll say is this: I did 2 tours overseas. I came home. I went to officer candidate school. I came home again. I made captain at 28, which is not something that happens without a lot of people deciding you've earned it. And last year at 31, I was promoted to major. Along the way, I was awarded a Bronze Star with Valor. If you don't know what that means, I'll explain it the way my commanding officer explained it to me the morning of the ceremony. It means that in a moment when standing still would have been the safer choice, I didn't stand still. It means something happened, and when it did, I moved toward it instead of away from it, and because of that, people who might not have made it home did. My family knew I had it. They'd been told. My mother sent a card. She did not fly out for the ceremony. My cousin Adrian is the kind of person who makes everything look easy. She's warm and funny, and she laughs at her own jokes before she finishes telling them, which should be annoying but somehow isn't. She got engaged to a boyfriend of 4 years last spring, and the moment she called me to tell me, I started crying before she even finished the sentence. "You have to be there," she said. "I mean it. I need you there." "I'll be there," I told her. The wedding was set for the last Saturday of October, a venue outside of Asheville, North Carolina, one of those old renovated estates with stone walls and oak trees older than anyone's grandparents, 300 guests, a string quartet, a dinner menu that had been agonized over for months. 6 weeks before the date, my mother called me. "I wanted to talk to you about the wedding," she said. "About what you're planning to wear." I knew immediately where this was going. I felt it before she said the next word. "I thought I might wear my dress uniform," I said. "Adrian said she'd love it." "Adrian is very sweet," my mother said carefully. "But this is a formal event, Colette, very formal. And I just think, with all of her husband's family there, people we don't know, I think it might feel a little out of place. A uniform at a wedding." I let a moment pass. "It is formal attire, Mom." "You know what I mean." "I actually don't." She sighed. That particular sigh, the one that sounds like patience being performed for an audience. "Your aunt and uncle have worked very hard to make this day feel elegant. I just don't want anything to pull focus. It's Adrian's day." Pull Focus. I turned the phrase over in my mind. Pull. Focus from what, exactly? From the flowers? From the string quartet? From the fact that her daughter's cousin had spent a decade serving this country and had medals to show for it? What I said was, I'll think about it. What I thought was, I have already decided. I need to tell you something about that bronze star because I think it matters for what happened next. I don't wear it to impress people. I wear it when I wear my dress uniform because the Army asks its service members to wear their full decorations when in dress uniform, and I follow the regulations I've sworn to uphold. That's it! There's no performance in it. There's no attempt to make anyone feel small or make any room about me. What happened to earn it is not something I talk about casually. But I'll say this much, there were 4 soldiers who came home because of decisions made in about 90 seconds in a valley I won't name, and 2 of them have since sent me messages on ordinary days, birthdays, Thanksgivings. One on a random Tuesday in February to tell me they were thinking of me, that they were grateful, that their kids had a parent because of what happened that day. That's what's on my chest when I put that uniform on, not a fashion statement, not an attempt to compete with anybody's centerpieces. That's what my mother asked me to leave at home. My father called the following week. He was gentler about it than my mother, which is his way. He always comes in after she's already made the argument and tries to smooth the edges without actually changing the position. She just doesn't want any awkwardness, he said. You know how she is with social things. I know exactly how she is with social things, I said. Colette. Dad, I've been wearing this uniform for 12 years. I've been deployed twice. I have a Bronze Star, and the conversation our family keeps having is whether I should be embarrassed about that in public. A long pause. No one is saying embarrassed. What word would you use? He didn't have an answer for that. Adrian wants me there in uniform, I said. She asked me directly. This is her wedding. I'm going to respect what she wants. He said he understood. His voice said he didn't, not really, that he was already thinking about how to explain it to the people at table 7. The drive to Asheville took me 6 hours. I'd been stationed at Fort Liberty for the past year and a half, and I made the drive alone, stopping once for gas and a coffee that tasted like it had been made sometime the previous afternoon. I called Adrian when I was 40 minutes out. Are you close? She asked. I could hear the controlled chaos of a bridal suite in the background. Someone laughing, someone asking about bobby pins, someone who might have been crying happy tears or terrified tears. It was impossible to tell. 40 minutes, I said. Okay, good. A pause and then quieter. Your mom talked to my mom. I gripped the steering wheel a little tighter. What did your mom say? She said you could borrow one of her dresses. Adrian's voice was careful, threading between loyalty to me and not wanting to start a war on her wedding day. I told her no. I told her I wanted you in uniform. She got a little. She stopped. She was fine. She said it was fine. She said it was fine. It's okay, I said. It is not okay, Adrian said quietly. But today is going to be beautiful, and I need you there, so please just come. I'm coming, I said. I'll be there. I arrived at the venue as the guests were being seated. The estate's main hall had been transformed. Candlelight, white flowers everywhere, round tables set with cream linens and small arrangements of eucalyptus and late-season roses. It was genuinely beautiful. Adrian had taste, always had. I handed my coat to an attendant near the door and walked to the main entrance into the hall. The string trio near the small stage stopped playing. Not all at once. It was one instrument, then another, the third trailing off a beat later, like a sentence that didn't know how to end. The room didn't go silent immediately. It happened in a wave rippling outward from the entrance as heads turned. Conversation dropped in sections, table by table, until the only sound was someone near the back setting down a glass. I kept walking. I wasn't trying to make a scene. I was trying to get to my seat, which Adrian had placed near the front because she wanted me close. I focused on that, on the table number, on getting there without tripping on anything, on keeping my face neutral and my chin level the way I'd been trained to do when all eyes are on you and you need to not look like all eyes are on you. I was maybe 20 steps into the room when I heard the first chair move, a scrape of wood against hardwood, and then someone stood up. I glanced to my right, an older man, maybe 70, dark suit, American flag pin on his lapel. He was looking directly at me, and his expression wasn't surprise or confusion, it was recognition, the kind that moves through a person's whole face at once. He said nothing, he just stood. Then, to my left, another chair, another person rising, a woman this time maybe 65, in a deep green dress, her hand pressed briefly to her heart before she straightened to her full height. Then another, and another. By the time I reached the halfway point of the room, 7 people were standing. By the time I got to my table, the number was closer to 12. 12 people on their feet, in a room full of strangers, for a woman they didn't know, because they recognized what she was wearing and what it meant. Nobody announced anything. Nobody made a speech. They just stood. I have been in a lot of situations that required me not to cry. I have had practice at this that most people don't. But standing there at my table with 12 strangers on their feet around me, I came closer to losing it than I had in a long time. I mouthed thank you to the room, to no one in particular, to all of them. Slowly, the room settled. Chairs resettled against the floor. The string trio found their place in the music again, picking it up a few bars back, like nothing had happened. But everything had happened. I sat down. The man who had stood first made his way over to my table during cocktail hour. His name was Roger. He was 72, he told me, and had done 12 years in the Navy before leaving to raise his kids and run a hardware business in Tennessee. He'd sold the business to his son-in-law 8 years ago and hadn't had a bad day since. He looked at the ribbons on my jacket with the focused attention of someone reading a document. "Bronze Star," he said. "It wasn't a question." "Yes, sir." "With Valor?" "Yes, sir." He nodded slowly. "Thank you," he said, "for your service, for wearing it." I told him it was an honor to be there. He shook my hand, a firm, practiced handshake, the kind that means something, and went back to his table. Later, a woman named Gloria found me near the dessert table. She was the mother of one of the groomsmen, she explained, and her late husband had served 2 tours in Vietnam. She had never been to a military ceremony in her life, she said, and she hadn't known what the Bronze Star meant until Roger explained it at their table. But the moment those 12 people stood, she said, she understood it wasn't about knowing. It was about recognizing that the person in front of her had given something that most people never have to give. She hugged me. She smelled like gardenias and hairspray, and she held on for a long moment. "Don't you ever hide that uniform," she said into my shoulder. "Don't you let anybody make you hide it." My mother found me near the end of the reception. The dancing had started. The lights had shifted to something warmer and lower, and the night had taken on that particular texture that good weddings get in their final hours. Loose and sweet, and a little bit like something you know you'll remember forever. She came to stand beside me at the edge of the dance floor, both of us watching Adrian and her husband, who were somewhere in the middle of the crowd with their hands linked above their heads. My mother didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she looked so happy. "She really does," I said. Another long pause. "The people who stood up," my mother said slowly, like she was working the words out as she said them. I didn't understand what that was." I waited. "Your uncle had to explain it to me," she said. "The Bronze Star. What it means, what you have to do to get one." She stopped. He looked it up on his phone at the table. He read me the description. Her voice had changed. Something in it had shifted from its usual measured register into something quieter and less certain. And I thought about you, a 12-year-old girl drawing maps of battles in the margins of her notebook. You were always telling me about generals and campaigns, and I didn't. She stopped again. My mother is not a person who apologizes easily. She's not someone who changes positions in public or admits to being wrong while it still costs something to say it. She spent her whole adult life building a version of herself that is composed and certain. I know this about her. I have spent my entire life navigating it. I should have been at the ceremony, she said, quietly, flatly, without excuse. I looked at her. Her eyes were bright in that way that means something is being held back by effort. I know, I said. We stood there for another minute or two, watching Adrian dance, watching the room full of people who had no idea that anything significant had just occurred at the edge of the dance floor. Then my mother reached over and took my hand. She didn't say anything else. She just held it. It was not a full apology. It was not everything I might have wanted. But it was the first time in 31 years that she had reached for me first. I've thought about the drive home for a long time afterward. 6 hours back through the mountains, the sun going down somewhere around hour 3 and the interstate opening up into that long dark stretch of I-26. I had the radio on and then I turned it off and just drove with the windows cracked and the October cold coming in at the edges. I thought about Roger, who stood without being asked. About Gloria, who held on for an extra second because she wanted me to feel it. About the 11 other people who rose from their chairs not because they knew me or knew my story, but because they recognized the uniform and understood, and the way that people who have served or loved someone who served understand what it represents. I thought about my mother's hand taking mine, about the years she didn't get on a plane, about all the years that have gotten us to this one. I don't think I have a tidy conclusion for you. I don't think that one evening in Asheville resolved 12 years of complicated history between my family and the life I chose. That's not how families work, and it's not how people work either. What I have is this. I wore my uniform to my cousin's wedding. 12 strangers stood up. My mother held my hand in the dark at the edge of a dance floor in the mountains of North Carolina and told me she should have been there. And I realized on that drive home that I had never once regretted enlisting. Not the deployments, not the distance, not the years of being the one in the family whose choices required the careful pause before anyone explained them to strangers. I had never wished I was different, and I had never been ashamed of what I do. But I had never felt until that night that my family might actually be starting to understand why. Service is not something you perform for the people who already believe in it. You carry it whether or not anyone sees it, whether or not the room goes quiet when you walk in, whether or not your mother gets on a plane. But when the room does go quiet, and when 12 people rise to their feet in a hall full of strangers, in a rented estate in North Carolina with roses on the tables and the string trio playing in the corner, you remember that it was always worth carrying. You remember, and you keep walking forward. On that drive home through the mountains, somewhere between Asheville and the long flat stretch of I-26, I kept coming back to the same thought. Nothing about that evening happened by accident. Not Roger standing up, not Gloria holding on an extra second at the dessert table, not my mother reaching for my hand in the dark. These things happened because of a chain of choices that stretched back years. Choices I made quietly, without applause, in the dark and the cold and the exhaustion of places most people will never see. You don't earn a Bronze Star by deciding one morning to be brave. You earn it by building over years, the kind of character that doesn't ask for permission to do the right thing when the moment comes. And that kind of character isn't built in a single dramatic gesture. It's built in the ordinary, unglamorous work of showing up when it would be easier not to. I think about that when I think about what integrity actually costs. not the integrity you perform when people are watching, the kind you maintain when no one is. The kind that says, I know what this uniform means and I will wear it correctly and I will not apologize for what I've earned, even when the people I love most are asking me to make myself smaller for their comfort. That's not stubbornness, that's self-knowledge. Knowing who you are clearly enough that other people's discomfort with it doesn't rewrite your understanding of yourself. But the thing I keep returning to is my mother's face. Not the face she made when I walked in. I couldn't see her from the doorway, but the face she had at the edge of the dance floor, 3 hours later when she told me she should have been at the ceremony. She looked like someone who had just understood something she'd been looking at wrong for a long time, and I realized that her understanding didn't come from me explaining myself. I had tried that on the phone, more times than I can count. What changed her wasn't an argument, it was evidence. It was 12 people rising from their chairs without being asked. It was Roger reading the medal citation on his phone at table 4 and reading it out loud. It was the room making visible what I had been carrying invisibly for years. You can't force people to see you clearly. You can only keep being the thing you actually are, consistently enough, long enough, that eventually the evidence becomes undeniable. That's not a comfortable truth. It requires a kind of patience that borders on stubbornness and a faith in your own judgment that the people around you may not share for a very long time. But I've watched what happens when people abandon that faith, when they reshape themselves around what's easiest for the room, and I've never seen it end with them feeling more like themselves. Adrian told me the next morning, over coffee in her hotel lobby, still in her pajamas with her new husband, half asleep on the couch, that 3 different guests had asked about me before the reception even ended. Not about what I'd done or where I'd served, just who is she? Like they wanted to know the person who came in and made the room go still without trying. I don't have a clean answer to that question, but I know that whoever she is, she took 12 years to become. She was built out of early mornings and hard decisions and appointments and the slow, patient work of choosing, again and again, to be someone she could recognize in the mirror. That's the only version of a life I know how to live.